One of the most important pieces of being a good clinician and doing sound clinical work is having great documentation. Progress notes, session notes, all of those things are part of what we do. And as you grow and you get larger, one of the things that is just such an important tool to have is a great electronic health record system. Therapy Notes is a practice management and EHR software that helps behavioral health professionals manage their practice with confidence and efficiency. It's what I use in my practice. So I highly recommend Therapy Notes. And if you'll use, when you go over and take a look at them and sign up, you can get a free trial. Plus, if you use the coupon code Gordon, Gordon, you can get 2 months free. So check out Therapy Notes today, therapynotes.com. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 65 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer, and welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you've joined me. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome, and take time to subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening. And if you are a long time or returning listener, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. So this has been an interesting week this past week for me. Some of you might have noticed I didn't have a podcast episode last week. And that's, one of those turns of life where we just have to adjust and go forward. I shared with some of the folks on my email list that last week I had to go over to North Carolina to help with my dad, who is 85 now, and bless his heart, he's got some dementia going on. And so we've had to kind of get some things in place. My family and I, my brothers and sisters, and my brother and sister rather, and my mom figuring out next steps with all of that. And so, when it comes to family, we just drop everything and go for it. So if you were looking for a podcast episode last week, I didn't have one. So that's why, not that you needed an excuse, but anyway, I just wanted to let you know about that. The other thing too is that, as you've been hearing from me for some time, I've been working on this Money Matters course, the Practice of Therapy Money Matters. And so I'm happy to announce today that I'm doing a pre-launch of the course. I'm still getting some finishing touches on the course. Like I said, last week was just kind of a wash for me, so I didn't get the things done that I wanted to. But what I'm doing is pre-launching the course. So what that means for you is if you're interested in taking the Money Matters course, I'm offering it as a pre-launch at half price. So for about $150, which I think you're going to see that it's well worth it. And there's also a way to do payment plans with that. You can sign up for the course. It's normally going to be around $300, but I'm going to offer it as a the pre-launch price of half off. So take a look at that. If you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com/finance course, you can get access to that. And if you'll use the coupon code when you go to check out on the Teachable platform, it's a coupon code of TAKE50 is the coupon code, and that way you can get half off. And that's just going to be for a limited time. I'm going to once the course is fully launched, the half price deal is going to go away. But this way you can get a good deal and get in on the front end of that. And I hope to, the plan is over the next couple of weeks, I'm recording this the last week of January. Over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be doing what they call dripping the content. So in other words, as I get modules finished, they'll be available for you to start watching and reading and that sort of thing. But I'm so excited about this course, if you can't tell, and that I just think it's going to be, my hope is it's going to be a great help to people and just learning the whole financial side of things. There's also, I spent yesterday putting together a kind of a promo video for it, and a neat little app that I found, and some of you might have run across this if you're on Facebook. They hooked me in here, but it's an app called Doodly, and so I'd love to hear from you what you think about the promo. I use that app to produce that video. So anyway, it was fun playing around with. I kind of geeked out on that and maybe spent a little too much time on it, but I think it came out really well. And I think it kind of portrays what the course is about and gives you a sense of what it is. Yeah. So the course is just simply, I go through just kind of teaching some basics around finance, particularly accounting and bookkeeping, just some basics around that. We're going to get into talking about knowing what to charge for your sessions. We're also getting into talking about taxes and things you need to be aware of around, being self-employed and how that's different from just regular employment and how taxes are treated differently. We're also going to talk about some of the profit first stuff and just get my spin on that. Many of you might know that I had the author Mike Michalowicz on the podcast several episodes back, and he wrote the book Profit First. And I think one of the things, one little tidbit I'll say about that is, the title might seem kind of deceiving. I know when I first heard the title Profit First, I thought, well, that sounds kind of greedy, but that's not the point of it. It's just being able to take your profit first by using allocations and but anyway, the course, I'm going to get into that. Let's see, what are some of the other things I've got on the agenda for the course? Just talking about bookkeeping and using programs like QuickBooks and FreshBooks, and creating spreadsheets to track things. I'll probably talk a little bit about electronic health records and how those kind of fit into the financial piece. Also, I've got a few guest spots on there too. Some people that have been on the podcast in the past. One is a friend of mine who's a CPA, a certified public accountant. Billy Robinson's going to be in the course. Also, Casey Compton. So some of you might know Casey. I'm a big fan of Casey. She's become a good friend of mine, and I've learned so much from her. She's got a multi-million-dollar practice in Kentucky, and she is just her superpower is just being able to put processes in place. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the course as well. So anyway, I'll commend that to you. I'm not going to say much more about that. It's practiceoftherapy.com/finance course. And when you sign up, if you go to that page too, you'll get the link to the free finance guide, which is just kind of it's a freebie that you can get that just kind of walks you through the process of kind of analyzing the financial side of your practice. So anyway, love to hear from you. Take advantage of the pre-launch price. I'm so excited to be getting this out to folks. One other thing that I was going to mention here in the intro before I have Megan on with me is I just want to commend a book to you that I discovered this past week. I went driving back and forth to my parents' place in North Carolina. It's about a 5-hour drive for me from here in Tennessee. But anyway, there was a book I discovered. It's by a guy by the name of Paul Jarvis, and the book is called Company of One. And it's a book about why it might be a good idea to keep your practice or your company small. And it really fits in well with my my philosophy about private practice. And so I did another bold move. I've tried to reach out to Paul Jarvis about maybe being on the podcast. Hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed that he will respond and join me for the practice, because it's practice for the podcast rather. I just hope I commend that book to you. It just really kind of pulled me in. I was listening to it on Audible and just couldn't stop listening to it. So I think it really speaks to really finding in the context of what we do, finding a practice that is the right size for you and not necessarily just growing for the sake of growing. So anyway, I'll commend that book to you, and I'll have links to that in the show notes. So it'll be an Amazon link that is a full disclosure. It's an Amazon link, but it's good stuff. So that's why I wanted to recommend it to you. So today again is my guest, Dr. Megan Warner, and Megan and I have become pretty good friends over the last couple of years. And so without further ado, here is Dr. Megan Warner. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I'm so thrilled to have with my friend and colleague, Dr. Megan Warner. And Megan and I met, again, it seems to be like a lot of my connections have come through Joe Sanok, but Megan and I were in a mastermind group together, and we have really got to know each other well and know each other's practices well. And she has been such a huge help to me in my journey and just learning from her and all that. And so welcome, Megan. I'm glad you're here.
Oh, it's so great to be here, Gordon. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. We've been trying to get this arranged for some time, and I'm glad we finally got to this day.
You've been very patient with us rescheduling issues.
Oh, well, that's how life goes. So, yeah. So, Megan, why don't you tell folks a little bit more about yourself and your private practice journey and how you've landed where you've landed?
Sure. Yeah, great. So I am a clinical psychologist in Guilford, Connecticut. And my private practice journey, I guess like some of the things about me that are interesting is that I've always liked to straddle the fence in the psychology world between academics and clinical practice. I love clinical work. Like I find it deeply fulfilling. I love that one-on-one relationship with clients and how transformative just that relationship can be. But I also really like research, and I always loved the academic world. And so when I was a grad student, there were frequent conversations about how can I have it all? How can I do everything at once? And the pushback was often like, you can't likely have everything at once. And I'm still trying to figure out if that's true. But I basically ended up with creating, so I had an academic job for a while. I taught at the New School. I currently supervise at Yale, their DBT program. I'm one of the outside supervisors that comes in.
Wow.
And yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. I love that work. And then I built a practice here in Guilford that tries to hold both of those academic interests on one hand and clinical interests on the other. So the practice, the tagline of the practice is compassionate therapy, scientifically designed. So
wow, I like that. I like that.
So that's where we are. So I have a tiny little group practice. There's 4 of us total, and everybody has sort of an orientation in an academic background, but also a lot of heart. And so that's the practice that we have now.
Right. I was trying to remember, Megan, how did you get started in private practice? What was that process like for you?
Well, I started out, kind of on an academic track when I left grad school, and there's sort of this internship and postdoc, and then I was in an academic job at the New School in New York, but a lot of the job was giving clinical supervision, teaching clinical skills, working with grad students one-on-one, supervising their casework. So I always kept one foot in the clinical side and loved it. And then after I had my son, I started my first child, Joshua, I didn't want to commute in and out of New York anymore.
Right.
So I really started to at that time I was living in New Jersey, and I just started to reevaluate quality of life issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a difficult choice because I love that academic world. I love research. I love faculty meetings. Well, not all faculty meetings, let's be honest, but I loved the idea, seminars, rounds, continuing education, all that stuff. But I wanted to take some time off and, be with my family and raise the first one and then raise the second one. And so I went back to private practice life in New Jersey, and then we made a move to Connecticut, and I just started to build a practice from here, and then created my academic connections as my practice was growing.
Yeah, and I know as we were talking about before we started recording, that's something that is I know passionate for you and passionate for me, is just making sure that when you go into private practice that it really fits your lifestyle. And I think that's really one of the big things that motivates people to go into private practice is that they want the freedom that it gives and the ability to set your priorities, and that you don't necessarily have to work that 40-hour work week and, punch yourself in and out on the clock, so to speak. And that's
absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think you're such a great representative of that. And I hope to also be a representative of that. I often tell my team, I care very much about their quality of life, the clients that they take and the hours that they work and how many evenings that any of us work. I think that really matters to maintain that flexibility and not get lost in too much of the go, to kind of reflect on is this what I want, where I want.
Yeah. And I was, as I probably have shared in the intro, I kind of record these things backwards a little bit, little secret there. I do my intros after I've recorded. But one of the things that I was sharing with Megan is I discovered this book called Company of One, and it's by a guy by the name of Paul Jarvis. And it really just talks about that whole idea. I think there's a lot of buzz and a lot of hype around, growing and volume and big and all that sort of thing. And I think really I think it's important for people to find the practice size that fits them, whether it's solo private practice or whether it's like Megan and I have similar size practices and that we're small group practices, or, if you aspire to, do the multi-million-dollar practice, find the right size for yourself.
Absolutely. And, and that may change over time, right? There may be times where it's there was a time where it was just me, and that was wonderful. And that was when my kids were the youngest, and I wanted control, over my schedule even more than I have now. And now my kids are a little older and I can manage a group practice. And maybe there'll be a time where that changes again. Who knows? But we have that flexibility too.
Right. Yeah. So I know, Megan, you've always been a person after my own heart. So I really appreciate that. So, another exciting thing I know for you, Megan, is kind of this new venture you're going out on. And I know what was great was I was kind of in the background through our mastermind group as you were developing this. And it was just so neat to see it come together. And you want to tell folks about Practibytes?
Yes,
and this new venture of yours.
Yes, you witnessed it take shape. You saw it form. Absolutely. So just like my private practice, I try to hold this middle. I try to bridge academics and clinical work in my private practice. And I was really thinking a lot about how as clinicians, what we're spending a lot of our time doing is worrying and thinking and planning and strategizing how to market our practices, how to build our practices, how to get clients into our practices, how to advertise, SEO, Google AdWords, all of that, all very important things in terms of running a practice. But we are not exposed to as much, clinically supportive things like what's the latest research on depression? What do we know about how the brain processes trauma? We're spending so much time, and all of us as therapists, we're curious. We wouldn't be in this field if we weren't curious,
Right.
inquisitive people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Curious, inquisitive people that want to provide good care and want to do well. And I think, the lovely thing about graduate school is that we're in this contained environment where we're exposed to the, latest research, and we're being given clinical support that references how to do our best work. We don't have to worry about some of these other details. And these other details, they take a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have as much time to do continuing education or webinars. And I think everybody intends to. I know I intend to.
Right.
I can't even imagine how many things I've signed up for that I haven't followed through on.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, there's sort of well-intentioned, curious clinicians that I think sometimes we can land in imposter syndrome. We start to feel like, do we actually know what we're doing? Are we out of touch with the work? It can be very anxiety inducing. So we have well-intentioned clinicians. And then on the academic side, having lived in that world as well, academics are also very curious, want to provide the best information, the latest science that will help the people, heal and help therapists treat. But it's known to be a bit of a silo. Academics within their own area, they know the research in a very deep way, but it's hard to get academic research to clinicians who I think actually really want it to provide elevated care for their clients. So the whole notion of Practibytes is to basically bridge these two areas, like academics that want to change the world to clinicians that want to change the world. Give access to these therapists that want little, relevant bursts, relevant morsels of information that will help their work. That's the idea of Practibytes.
Yeah. And I think that's you're exactly right. I think, I think for like most therapists, I tend to be a little of a brain science geek. Mm-hmm. And, I could probably spend hours delving into the research behind that. But then there's other things that we've got to do. And so I think being able to, figure out ways to pull that in, and you've probably experienced this in sessions when you start talking about, I just think about one of the things that I do a lot of couples work. And so we talk about when a couple gets into an argument or a fight about something, just talking with them about what's happening in the brain, you can kind of see them, the light bulb go off, and it's just, that's important to our clients as well.
Yes, exactly. Like those are those tiny little moments when you say like that makes me think of like the amygdala, right? When you say to a client who has trauma, well, this thing is actually happening in your brain that's driving this intense fear and urge to run or urge to fight. Like there's actually something going on in your brain that's so important. When you say like, this is the part of the brain and this is what's happening, that takes like what, a minute?
Yeah.
And they walk out of the room. Like it's very validating in a way that I think is deeply important. And that's exactly what I want to provide to therapists is sort of tidbits of information that clients can gain from. Short little bursts of information. Because, none of us have time for an hour, webinar on the brain at this point, although if we do, that's wonderful. But it's really hard to find that hour to put aside marketing needs and client needs, note writing needs. I want to do something quick, short and relevant and practical for therapy.
Yeah. So tell folks a little bit about how you're pulling this together. And I know you've started a community around these issues, and more about that.
Yeah. So the plan, a couple of things, I guess. So we're starting a community. That's a Facebook page. So the first place is the Facebook page. So check out Practibytes on Facebook. That's where we're going to grow our community. And very much like you've done, Gordon, I'm leaning on my community first. There's wonderful academics that I'm close to that I'm leaning on now to chat with me about what's been going on. Just yesterday, I talked to a colleague of mine, a former, sort of my academic brother. He was in my lab, and we were talking about how hard it is for therapists to work with personality disorders, and how daunting it is when you learn that a client has a personality disorder diagnosis. But that in the reality, personality disorders are actually not as stable as many of us have been trained to believe. The research doesn't support that. And how revolutionary that is to know, just to sort of even share right now, wow, they actually tend to get better over time, whether they're in treatment or not. They may be complicated to treat, but isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Gives a little bit of hope, right?
Right.
So I'm leaning on my, academic community to give me this content. I'm interviewing them. I'm asking questions that are basically, what can you tell me that will help our therapy work, right? Like what from your research is going to make my work better or easier? Or what can you tell me from your work that my clients need to know?
Right.
So that's what I'm collecting that content.
Yeah.
And going to make it available.
Yeah. So have you been able to, are you, I guess, not to put you too much on the spot, but how are you doing this like through mastermind groups or through chat on Facebook, or, what's kind of your big idea with all of that?
The big idea in terms of how people will access that content?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Well, I think the first step, in terms of bridging this gap between the clinicians and the academics is getting the information and creating a space where, like, the community is, so we're going to start with this Facebook site and Facebook group and just create a group of therapists that are interested in knowing more and interested in access to this information. And then we'll probably put bits and pieces of the information on the Facebook group. And my guess is it'll probably evolve into a membership community, something very reasonable. I know that it's very expensive to run a practice, but probably something like a membership community where people will have access to more of the content. And I'm hoping to make, helpful additions to the content, so that I see it being like a membership thing, and probably like a YouTube page with the video interviews, or maybe like a podcast snippets. So that's certainly information.
Yeah. And it's exciting stuff. I mean, it's just really, I think, I think there's so much, we've got a plethora, which is a good thing, a plethora of people that, and resources just on building a private practice, the business side of things, which is certainly something I'm passionate about, is do I do what I do with this. But that whole clinical piece, what I love about it is it kind of gets away from kind of the, no offense intended here, but kind of the stuffy academia kind of way of looking at research and that sort of thing. And there's, and I hope I'm not stepping on anyone's toes by saying this. Yeah. There's, I think there's almost kind of a snobbish kind of a feel to some of that stuff. And what I love about what you're doing, Megan, is just making it. I remember we were throwing names around when you were developing all this, is like you've done with your private practice. Your tagline is that, it's, mental health care with heart. And, and so that's what's just really, really appealing to me.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think you're right. I mean, I definitely think it's unintended. I think what happens in the silo of academia is that people get so deep into their areas and they talk to other people that know their areas. And because my interest is in personality, that's what comes to mind, personality disorders. And so a lot of information about that is understood within that field. Like we talk about personality, diagnostic assessment strategies or measures, I might say testing names, like with an assumption that everybody knows what I'm talking about. But when we return to the world of private practice, practice, we all come with different interests. We have perinatal and postpartum specialists. We have anxiety specialists. We have assessment specialists. So the assessment people might know what I'm talking about if I'm talking about assessment, but not everybody could be expected to know at that level of depth. We all have our own backgrounds. And so
right.
I want exactly for this to translate things into kind of the meaningful points, like not the research methodology, not the samples that were taken, not that stuff doesn't matter. It does, but this isn't the forum for that. This is the forum for how can we help therapists feel like they're doing good work, and how can we help therapists help their clients?
Right. Yeah, that is so, I think just so needed. So, Megan, what else have you got on the horizon for yourself? I know one of the things that we chatted about a little bit was just on the business side of things, just how I've switched from having strictly contractors to now having pretty much all employees. And so, you want to say a little bit about that, and just maybe some of the things that
some of those business.
Yeah, some of those business things that you've kind of figured out.
Yeah, I really, it's funny because I view Practibytes like this journey to be, I remember saying to Joe Sanak at this meeting that we had where this also was taking shape, that I want Practibytes to basically be a macro of what my practice is on a micro level.
Yeah.
And what's worked for me in the practice has been a W-2 model. I found that wonderful because with the W-2 model, we have weekly staff meetings. We do, we have DBT consultation team meetings, which is sort of like a, peer supervision, but under a DBT sort of umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a team approach that you can get certainly with contractor models, but I like having that control. I like having that sense of we all have a shared mission, and it's not that I'm imposing my mission on everybody because I'm only hiring people that join me kind of in this. But I feel like that it can be very lonely being a therapist. It can be so isolating. And I think the idea of the Facebook community for Practibytes, the idea of the staff meetings in my practice is to make it less lonely and to have that sense of supporting each other, whether from a small scale or a big scale.
Right.
So very wordy thing to say about W-2s, but W-2 is the model that allows for that.
Yeah. And one of the things that, I'm figuring out too is as passionate as I am, and I know you are, about being the owner of a private practice, that's not necessarily for everyone. There are a lot of people out there that would really like to have just a great place to work and an environment to work in that's, that's family friendly, is that, that cares not only about their clients, their patients, but also their employees, the people that are working there. And again, I think that's one of the things that's nice about private practice. I'd spent 9 years working for a nonprofit agency that was just a huge nonprofit agency. It covered several states as far as where they offered services. And even though I really embrace their mission and their values, when you get to be that size, it's just you kind of lose something, and you get into being numbers and all that kind of thing. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
One of my favorite qualities of our practice is that it really matters the fit of the client to the particular therapist.
Yes.
And that's challenging from an admin perspective. I've learned that it's difficult to communicate that to, potential admin support, because it's like, well, you have to really know the therapist to really know the client. You have to have some clinical skills on the phone. And I've learned that that's an issue, related to training, and I'm getting better about that. But I absolutely, it goes to quality of life, because if you have that power as someone who wants to work in a practice to see who you want to see and to schedule how you want to schedule, that it's just a great situation. And I completely agree, Gordon. This is such an important point that not everybody wants to run a private practice, or again, these things change with time. My hope is that anyone that works with me feels like if they ever want to run a private practice, that they can with my blessing. I also hope that they won't want to.
Right.
I'm giving them such a quality of life, and I'm giving them control, and I'm paying them well, And I think there's no shame in that. Like, I think many people want the support. Like, I make the phone calls about billing, I do that stuff, and I'm happy to do it because they're giving good clinical work.
Yeah, and that's I think what I've learned too for me is that I kind of like tinkering with the systems and processes around all this, and I'm really happy to provide that for the people that are working for me, and and it's what's great is I was having this conversation with one of my new therapists that started this first of the year, Kelly, and she was just kind of apologizing for having to take time off to help with her son's stuff and his school projects and all that sort of thing. And I said, Kelly, I really could care less when you work. You get to decide that. That's why I set it up the way I set it up. You create your own schedule, and so you work when you want to work. And that's and it's so it's so that. Feels good to be able to do that and not.
Yes. Mm-hmm. You trust. It's like as if you're communicating to her that you sort of trust the overall picture.
Right.
You have faith in the overall picture that it will work out, which really goes to hiring, I think, is that we're very careful who we hire. And it's like, I say the same to my team. If you want to go on a 2-week vacation, that's fine because I know who I've hired. And I know they'll come back, and I know they're not going to leave their clients. And that's hard to hire. It's hard to find therapists that that you can have those feelings about. But it's so worth it. So worth it.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, Megan, I am so glad you joined me today and that we were able to have this fun conversation. If folks want to get in touch with you and find out more about Practibytes, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, well, I would definitely recommend coming and finding us on Facebook. I'll give you the link to put in the show notes.
Yes.
It's the Practibytes Facebook page, and we have a website. It's practibytes.com. And then you can email me at megan@practibytes.com about anything. If you have great research ideas, great topics you want discussed, somebody you worked with in grad school that you think would be a person to reach out to, by all means, I would love to hear it. Yeah, that's great. I love what you're doing, and I'm so much appreciate the fact that we've gotten to be friends over those last few years, and that's great. Me too, Gordon. Your support means the world to me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, thanks. And I'm sure I'll be talking to you soon. Absolutely. Take care. Bye. I'm so glad that Megan was able to join me for this episode. She is just a dear person, and she is, I've just really enjoyed getting to know Megan over the last few years. And as you can tell, listening to her, she's truly got the heart for what we do. And I'm so glad she's doing this project she's working on, Practibytes, and do go over and look at that. Take a look at her stuff at practibytes.com. And, and so, I hope to have Megan back here in the future. So, but take a look at her stuff, and that'll be in the show notes as well if you want to take a look over there. And, I do take a look at I want to invite you again to take a look at the Money Matters course that I've got the pre-launch going on right now, and take advantage of the reduced price for that. And again, you can get that at practiceoftherapy.com/finance course. And that'll get you to the page to look at all of that and check it out. Also, I just want to mention again, our sponsor for today, Therapy Notes, and go over and take a look at them. They're who I use in my practice, and I really have enjoyed that platform. It's a great platform, and
you've heard from me before, I don't really like to recommend anything that I don't know something about or don't use myself. So Therapy Notes is a great electronic health record system. And if you're at that place in your practice, take advantage of that. So, well, folks, that's going to do it for this week. Looking forward to some future episodes. I was thinking this morning before I got ready for work, I've got 2 Lauras coming up. I've got Laura Long, and some of you might know Laura from Facebook. And Laura's one of those private practice rock stars that's out there. And so I'm excited to have her on a future episode. And then Laura Painter, who is affiliated with the Mindsight Behavioral in Kentucky. Again, Casey Compton's practice up in Somerset, Kentucky, and other places there in eastern Kentucky. But what's neat about Laura Painter is that she is Casey's human resources person. So we're going to talk about human resources stuff and things around having a large practice and hiring the right people and the whole hiring process if you're at that place in your practice where you're maybe moving into group practice. So take care, folks, and we'll be talking with you next time on the Practice of Therapy podcast. Been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.